why don't you pretend to just do this? Now, sometimes it's like, that's Captain Obvious, but actually that's true.
Welcome to Off Script, part of the Wild and Wise podcast, a space for business and creative minds to come together to look at how do we stay sharp, relevant, and future ready in a space and day where the world keeps changing. Today, we have a very special guest with us, Johnny Tan.
Yo, welcome. Thank you.
Instead of reading through his bio, I'll let him talk a little bit about himself and do a bit of introduction. So, Johnny, who are you and what do you do?
Who am I? That's a $1 million question. I'm still discovering what that is. But in terms of what I do, in theory, I'm a chief creative officer of a big agency. However, in recent times, that's changed a little bit. My scope's been reduced a little bit more. Actually helps me get back into the craft a little bit more. But my career started a long time ago in New York, where I worked for BBDO. But it was also my first sort of exposure to international big campaigns and what have you. I'm being a little Singapore boy. That was a big dream come true. So I kind of start there, work with some of the biggest directors and whatnot. And, did that for about 10 years. And after that, got a little curious about China at the time. It was in the front cover of every magazine. Decided to go to China and explore. But when I got there, I got a phone call from Sir John Hegarty, who said to me, like, can you help me set up an agency out here? I was like, okay. Didn't know how to do that per se. And just immediately took that opportunity and got on this journey of being an entrepreneur. I had two other partners at the time, and we just built it from the ground up. And all of us were foreigners, by the way, in China at the time. So it was a big gamble, but we learned as we went. And I was very proud to say that we spent about 10, 12 years together and built a pretty successful agency at the time. By the way, I told John I was going to do this for 2 years, and that turned out to be 12. But along the way, there was a lot to learn, and I got a bit of the entrepreneurial bug. We started a couple of other agencies within BBH, which was quite interesting. We started a very agile production company as well. And that was also because the world was changing and production wasn't big budgets all the time. And, with the advent of obviously other social platforms and whatnot, we needed to create content quicker. So that was set up, and that was called Black Sheep Productions, which eventually became enormously successful in its own right. The first time we did it, it was literally a broom closet, and we had to get what we call Sanzaiban software, which is the knockoff version, because we couldn't afford anything.
Photoshop.
And we set it up, and we had to make a show reel. So we got people in the agency. We shot a short film, and there was a pregnant creative was like pretending to smoke a cigarette carrying a machine gun. So I'll show you that film at some point. It was a funny bit, but what it was it demonstrated that we could do it. We could create content fast and create content that was really, really good. And that kind of sort of took a life of its own. Anyway, that entrepreneurial thing got me to the next chapter, which was at 72 and Sunny. So John and Glenn spoke to me about starting another agency. I was like, oh, great. Let me try to do that again. This time was in Sydney. Again, in the whole market, I had no idea what it was like. Took that challenge, plunged in head first, start Sydney, but that wasn't enough. As if that wasn't enough, wanted to venture into Southeast Asia. So we started 72 and Sunny in Singapore. To be honest, there was a part of me that felt like the BBH thing was a bit of a fluke. No matter how you rationalize it, you're like, actually, we found good people, we were good leaders, et cetera, et cetera. But in the part of me, it was like, oh, maybe that was just a fluke. Maybe I had the blessing of John and everybody and things worked out. So trying a new adventure to see if I could do it again, was one of those things that, the impetus to get there. So when we did that, Sydney was great. It worked out. But then when we got to the Singapore part of it was when all hell broke loose with COVID. And to be perfectly honest, it almost broke me. It was one of those things where you would never expect that as an entrepreneur, as a creative leader, you worry about whether you could pay someone's salary. You worry if your lights will stay on.
Yeah.
Very sobering, very humbling, and was not in sight. That was the problem. So you're treading water, wondering whether that could work out. Of course, there's a lot to be learned from that. Yeah. So coming out of that and decided to go Accenture Song, and that was a whole other learning curve altogether. So I've covered many, many continents in terms of development. But maybe that's a very long-winded way of saying, like, I went from, being a kid who wanted to create something to having done some of the best campaigns in the world, but also having to learn some of the most bitter mistakes along the way as well. So that's kind of where I'm at as a creative director. Still love what I do. You know, it's one of those things where sometimes I show up on a film set and I go, I can't believe that there's 100 people here trying to realize an idea that I conceived when I was taking a dump, you know? It's a weird thing.
Those ideas are there.
And you go, these guys are doing that. You know, it still gives me that kind of thrill. It still makes me excited to go, you take a piece of paper and come up with something so exciting that you can't wait to tell somebody about. I don't think I've lost that. So in a way, I think just as a pin and go, okay, am I still loving it? And I still love being a creative director? Absolutely. You know, although the business of creativity has changed significantly.
How do you typically describe what you do to your parents or to your older relatives? Because I've always struggled with that.
Interesting. This happened recently, by the way. I told my mom, who was going to explain to her friend what I was, you know, what I did for a living. And I said, look, think of it this way. I'm chief matchmaking officer. My job is to make people fall in love with brands. That's what I do. I give them a reason why they should have a meaningful relationship with brands. And they seem to understand that. So I tell stories. I make people laugh. I make people cry. I make people connect. I think that's how I put it.
Cool. That's a good analogy because the struggle is always real, and especially the older generation. Like, how do you make money with this creative thing you're doing?
I'm not sure my mom will buy that though.
When we talk about creativity and the space that we're all in, I think whether it's advertising or any other creative space, like a lot of, obviously, maybe the last couple of years has been sort of this huge groundswell of change in the industry, most prevalently through AI. I guess the question right now, or I think what it will be interesting to sort of delve into is this with AI and hybrid work and this culture of speed and change. What does a modern creative actually look like right now? And not necessarily in the agency world, right? But generally, when we talk about people who want to make stuff, right, and bring a part of their soul into the world.
I think the advent of obviously the new technologies and new possibilities, it's like gaming, first person sort of games, and you collect tools. And when the more tools you collect, the toys you have, the weapons you have, it's like the more badass you become, right? In a way, the modern day creative is such, right? You have a lot more, you know, bazookas and whatnot at your disposal to do stuff. The problem is sometimes it does make you less reliant on the pure craft of solving a problem. You become a lot more reliant on the tools that you have. It's a strange thing. So using this gaming analogy again, if I was a pure sniper trained to a sniper, I'm using a bolt, you know, weapon. There's a lot of consideration involved, and I need to figure out wind speed and all the rest of it to be able to shoot right. Now it's like, okay, I got stuff that's almost automatically does it for me. It takes a little bit away from that energy, that process of crafting something. And I think that can be good and bad. Obviously, I'm a big fan of what AI could do. You know, it can level up the game, but it takes away a lot of finer things of creativity. As creative director, I see a lot of storyboards all the time. And in the last year or so, I haven't seen a hand-drawn storyboard. You know what I mean? It's everything's crafted because somebody wrote a prompt and that came out. It looks beautiful. But if you're a filmmaker, you understand that there's a lot more than that. First of all, you're never going to be able to achieve that half the time of what the AI generated for you. But at the same time, you got to think about a lot of other things. How would you craft a shot? And recently, I've revisited some of these things because a good friend of mine, Joseph Kahn, who's a filmmaker, and we always exchange notes online. And we went back into geeking out on film. So we started watching Steven Spielberg films again. I remember one video that Spielberg said, he's like, you want to learn how to make a film, watch movies and turn the volume off and just watch how you craft, you know, cutting one scene to another, why you move a camera a certain way. And when you get back into that and you back to the question of having all these AI tools, a lot of times you don't do that anymore. You don't have those considerations. Why did I follow this camera this way? Why did I cut to a close-up? Why did I go to filming the hand of a person, showing a reaction as opposed to an action? It takes a little bit away. And craftsmanship has a combination of things. It's both a very visceral thing, at the same time, it's also a very tactile thing. You know, if that combination makes something special. And I feel like AI may be able to accelerate some of these things, but because it's accelerated, it's just everything else in between is a blur. You know, so it's a bit of a shame.
I'm curious, you recently shifted obviously from advertising agencies to consulting. What was the biggest learning, or has your definition of creativity changed in any way? What was the biggest learning in that shift?
I mean, to be really honest with you, I started to really realize what consultancy is, which I had a misconception of it. I always thought consultancy had the smartest people, they had the right foresights and all that kind of stuff. You go to them like seeking the wisdom of Merlin, and you'll tell you it's not like that. I think one of the biggest problems with whether it's consultancy or agencies for that matter, there's a lot of stuff that looks backwards now. And why I say that is because when I want to propose something to you, I can do one of two things. One is I can present to you a vision of success and vision of the future, or what an idea could do for you. The approach today is I have an idea. Let me justify why this idea is sound. Here's data that can show this. This is behavioral changes, psychographic. Otherwise, that's why I have an idea. It's not looking forward and being really scared about what that could be, but also being very inspired and feel tingly about, oh my God, that could change things. So the perspective shift has made me realize that we're moving towards a safer, by definition, consultancy tells you, hey, you consult because I can tell you how this will work and why it works. Whereas I think as creative directors, your first and foremost job is to show that vision of where that brand can go. So I think now we are indexing a little too far on this side, on the safer side of things, which is one of those learnings that, to be honest, disappointed me a little bit, because I thought the crossroads between consultancy, technology, and creativity can be a very powerful tool. In theory, I still believe that it can be a very powerful tool. It's how you approach it.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
As a creative, with AI and all that coming across, is there a fear of you or the creatives losing the craftsmanship in the way we do things?
Absolutely. I think, this debate's happened quite a bit, and it's very binary. So sometimes they make that conversation very much like either you embrace AI, you don't embrace AI. I don't think it's that simple. I feel like there's a lot of gray area here. I think most people see the power of AI and go, okay, that's great. But there is a certain, as I've explained earlier, there's a certain tactileness about craftsmanship, right? Whether it's writing, whether it's visual craftsmanship, there's something that requires a little bit more thinking, trial and error, and all the rest of it. Whereas I think AI and the rest of the tools that comes along with it strips away a little bit of that. And if that goes on, you're going to lose the magic of craft. And I still don't know how that would look like. I certainly don't think that's going to be a great future.
I mean, I come from the music industry and I work with a lot of creatives, musicians as well. And it's a question that I cannot always answer also, right? Like the journey of creating something beautiful, like the craft of a movie and art. But then there's the reality of AI coming in as well, and how do we coexist? So maybe the definition of what a creative will be is maybe also shifting, and that is also shifting. And how do we then relook and reframe the way we approach what the creative process might look like in the future. The past is different and the future is different. So, but a little bit of a traditionalist also in myself because I come from the hard work of practice, right? Songwriting, doing everything like visceral feelings versus that, okay, the prompt and then something comes out, right? Yeah. Again, I think it's a different school of thoughts.
Is that the danger versus the tool itself, right? Is it the overconvenience of technology and relying on the overconvenience versus the actual tool itself, whereby you go, I'm going to give up the thinking and the creativity and the craft, where you can still do it with AI, but because it's so convenient, right? I mean, we've had this argument when you go from, vinyls to digital or film.
Sure,
we're still arguing about 35mm and all that. I just wonder whether that's it versus the tool by itself.
I feel like that's probably it. I think that the tool does what it needs to do. The reliance on it, right? And I mean, people use different analogies all the time. Recently, I was talking to a friend of mine who used to be a colonel, and he's talking about like, one of his biggest gripe is his soldiers can't navigate without a GPS system now. Yeah. Remember back in the day, you used to look at
compass and remembers phone numbers now.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
Possible.
So it's a weird thing. Like, is it good that you have a navigational tool that you can hit button and know exactly where you are? Absolutely. No one's denying that. But if that's all you rely on and not learn the finer details of why navigation the way it is, then you're losing something, right? Yeah. So I think it is that. It is just using the tools in the right place. But in terms of processes as well, sometimes I do find that AI is a good to eradicate some of the problems, the challenges that you have of a white piece of paper, right? Sometimes it's like, where do I even begin, right? It can give you a little bit of a push towards getting started, but you can't just go like, that's your solution. I think if you use it wisely, it could be amazing, right?
So what do you look for in a creative right now when the tools are abundant, but maybe taste isn't?
I'm still looking for, my personal definition of creativity is, the ability to find a compelling, original solution and an effective one, right? That is still the fundamental tool that any creative should possess, right? And the rest of the stuff, if it helps that person hit that target, absolutely. It's just, don't lose track of the fact that it's just a prompt and solution and solve, and that's it, right? There's also some level of curation, and we've seen this happen before. Sometimes you can prompt as perfectly as you can. What you get is some dude with 6 fingers, and if you don't curate it properly or find the right things to augment it a little bit better, then it's still not great. There's also the big question of everyone's using the same tools. You're going to end up with the same product, is it? That's naturally going to happen. So unless you add your little bit of your point of view into it, your taste, your vision, to make it a certain way, it's going to be vanilla. And I can't believe that's going to be a good thing, whether you're a musician, whether you're a visual artist, etc. The last thing I want to do is to create something that everybody else could.
I mean, the flip side is also because everyone can so easily create right now. There's just a lot of stuff out there. And I think curation and taste is like being able to have the taste to curate what's interesting, what's creative, what's original is, I think, becoming more the important skill than being able to just create nice things.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Because everyone can do it right now. I mean, from a creative standpoint, like what's something that maybe you have done or somebody else has done that made you believe that, because I have the same belief, like creativity can really change the world, like can make a difference.
Yeah, I can perhaps share 2 things. One piece of work that I personally have done. This was years ago, before, webisodes was a thing. I wrote a script. It's a bit of a long story. I was supposed to go and sell a script based on a brief that was given to us for Johnny Walker. And that was based on the success of the previous campaign we did. So the client's like, oh, you did so well back then, do another one. So I wrote this script, but my gut just kept telling me this is not the right thing to do. So I decided to write a completely different thing. I spoke to my strategist on the side and said, hey, look, I want to do this whole thing. Can you just back me up here? He's like, oh, absolutely. So I wrote a 5-part, webisode thing about 4 guys coming together and how they help each other be successful, because that was what China was about.
I know what you're talking about.
and became successful. So I showed it to my internal bosses, who said, no, don't do that. This is a shoe-in. They wanted this, just do another script. They just absolutely said no. So I flew to London. I was supposed to send it to my client, and decided in the last minute. I called my business partner. I said, look, man, I'm going to go sell my one. And I went in and saw the clients. So my boss, everyone was pissed off. Came out, clients happy as can be. They said, we want to try this. So long story short, we went ahead and made it. It was the first time we did that. And above and beyond that, this was China, where everything needs to be glitz and glamour and statusful. I decided to make that film duotone, not glitz and glamour. That film came out and it was hugely successful. Now, a long way of saying, one day I was at an airport gate waiting to get on a plane, and I saw some dude sitting there on his laptop, and he's got a screensaver thingy, had a picture, screen grab of my film. So I went up to him and just kind of, hey, what's up? Didn't know who it was, just have a chat. And he said, oh, this is a great advertising that I wanted to inspire myself to, to hit my goals in life. I just put it out on my screen so I remind myself every day. I went up, I didn't tell him that I did that. I went out on the plane, I felt very chuffed. And I told myself, if I can influence one person to do that, imagine what this campaign can do for a lot of people, right? So that was the moment where I went, I have a power to move people. I don't know if that means I can change the world, but I can certainly create some momentum, right? And that felt pretty good, because I felt like in this little element of this planet, I could do something. I could create some kinetic motion here, which was great. And I always remembered that, because I know that my definition of my job, sometimes I do sell things to people who don't need them. But if that can be done in a way that inspires, and sell, that's a great thing. So that was a sweet spot. I felt like it could change the world. And the second part to answering your question was when I first saw Here's to the Crazy Ones, I felt jealousy. Obviously, I said, I wish I did something like that. And I think that film, that campaign still holds up today. And what it tries to do still holds up today. And that is the kind of work that I go, I'm happy and I'm glad and blessed to be in advertising.
Running a business impacted the way you think about creativity? Because I always look at Haggerty and people like Ogilvy, who are both creatives and also running a business, and they have to manage the revenue and profitability and client. Has that in any way kind of shaped or colored your view on creativity and how you sell in particular?
Yes and no. I mean, I think it's helped me be inspired by what I do, but it's also gone the other way because there are the realities of keeping a business going and all those things. And those things are hard, right? It does take you farther away from, what you want that business to be most of the time. And a lot of times, a lot of people come to me and ask me like, oh, it'd be great to start my own agency. My first instinct is like, are you ready to create the worst ad in the world, to keep your business alive, right? So there's that reality and it takes a little bit away. On the other hand, running your own business and having people go through your company and whatever your beliefs are and create work that endures. And not only the work that endures, but having people gone through your tutelage or your mentorship and have become amazing creatives, that to me has been very rewarding, right? Especially being a quote unquote business owner, I can shape what my company wants to be. And my company has to have a culture and has to have the kind of vision that will have people walk through them and be better people. So that I'm still very excited about it.
Same question for music though. Do you think that applies the same thing while running a business and the craft?
It definitely is, right? I always look at creative and commercialization, the two C's, right? How do you actually create viable business out of the work that you do?
Yeah.
Essentially, if you look at an artist or a musician or any creative, you want to have work that represents who you are. But if you want to build a career, sometimes it's never a linear path, right? Sometimes you just need to take dips, changes, side quests, and then come back to the main game again. That's part of the journey. That's what really it is. Yeah. So I think I look at it as very similar to running a business. You have to be creative, but you have to, the commercial aspect to it is also very key.
The business should be run by someone who understands the practice. I mean, I look at architecture as an example and how it's always run by an architect because maybe, I've never been there, but maybe because, they understand the structure, what they're trying to sell, how to build a team, for example. So I've always thought about it that way. And I believe that's a challenge for agencies as well. How do you think about it in that way, right? Rather than being purely run by bean counters, which is a lot of cases. But how do you ensure that it's someone who understands the product, but also understands the business and builds it around the product? I'm the guy I believe creativity is a verb and not titles, but yeah.
But I mean, on the contrary to that, I mean, I've also known like people who are great creatives who went on to start their own businesses and don't do it well. And I think there is that aspect of creativity for creativity's sake and creativity as a problem-solving tool. And once you understand the latter, then that's where there are better ways to monetize and ensure that, the work stays true, but the light stay on as well.
Sure.
Yeah. I mean, you got to love the product, right? You have to.
Absolutely. And to your point, like you need people who love the product, who understand how that product is made. For sure. One of the best creative directors I've worked for, I mean, I put this in quotes, creative directors, is actually Nigel Bogle. Nigel Bogle is a suit. For all intents and purposes, he's not supposed to be the creative one, but he is.
Yeah.
His instincts are incredibly good.
Yeah.
His ability to understand like what you're trying to create here will lead to the impact that it has creatively, but also the business impact it has.
Yeah.
So he's got both of those things down. He could see that every time you present an idea to him, so it doesn't necessarily mean that creative businesses have to be run by creative people per se, but it needs people who respect the process and who respect the product that's going to come out of it and support it. There's no doubt that needs to happen. And companies who don't, we're living it to some extent. It's not gonna lead to something great. I think the differences between good and great is significant. John, can I say? John used to say good as shit. I always felt that's a bit too, extreme to say that. But then when you think about the reason behind why he says it, to reach greatness takes a lot of different other elements to get there. Anybody can get to good. It's the great that's hard.
What do you think is something that creative industry as a whole celebrates but actually holds people back?
Awards.
I was fishing for that.
Let me qualify that a little bit. Let me clarify that a little bit. I think the obsession with awards, that's the problem. There's nothing wrong with awards. I think as an outcome of what you've done and getting the right accolades and being saluted for it, it's a good thing.
Yep.
I'm not against that at all, but the obsession of it. And what happens is when obsession creates a certain desire to get to that at all cost, and to get to that in a way that someone else has gotten to that. So what ends up happening is you start to create an outcome of creativity is based on a formula that's happened. And I think that is stifling, and I think that just leads you to a box. And that's what's happening right now in the industry, I think.
Just a good example of when the measurement becomes a target, it ceases to be a good measurement.
Yeah, exactly.
I was just going to say that, right? I mean, I've seen examples where they've come up with really interesting ideas that have solved business problems that are absolutely creative.
Mm-hmm.
But because the target is an award, in order to make it there, I've created a film.
And the criteria.
And I celebrate the film
Correct.
rather than the solution.
Exactly.
And I think that's the danger.
Or the entire campaign is designed around the criteria for the awards.
Exactly.
The actual problem you're solving, right?
Exactly. And what the jury members are looking for, and therefore I'm creating something exactly what they would like. I don't think that's a really dangerous place to go.
Yeah. It's a great segue to maybe talking a little bit about education as well. I think one of the things that we wanted to also talk to you about is that you've co-founded Creatopia with your wife, right, in terms of trying to nurture bravery, creativity, and kindness with kids. And also, I think you've talked a bit about how parenting and with your daughter has sort of made you think about creativity. But I think one of the things we want to talk about as a foundation to that is really like, how do you see creativity in our education right now, right? Mm-hmm. Or whether there is or lack thereof, and how would you then look at instilling more creative bravery into our kids these days as they sort of, trying to teach them different ways of looking at problems, how our school system is usually like, okay, here's a problem sum, and there's typically only one way to solve the problem, and you have to show me the exact way. If not, you don't get the marks, right? Yeah. So maybe a little bit about your thoughts around that.
I'm extremely passionate about education. And in fact, this has been a passion of my wife and myself for a long time. Part of it comes from what I went through myself. So growing up in Singapore, I was lucky, I suppose, that I knew early on I wanted to be a creative person. I just didn't know that was what it's called.
What was that moment, by the way?
I'm going to say something that's going to sound really weird. When I was a kid, I was playing around with Scotch tape. And they had this little metal ring around it. So when you pull the Scotch tape and you just tear it off. They don't make it like that anymore. When I looked at the Scotch tape, I didn't see a Scotch tape. I saw a Vigo. I saw this little metal thing on top. That's where you sat on. This is the big wheel. You can go through everything. In my head, I was already imagining the kind of adventures, the superhero things I could do with that. And I was always like that. I always saw something and I go, ooh, that could be a whole other thing. And I start imagining things. So in my head, I'm like, this got me so excited that I want to do something like that. I want to create weird things like this. Just didn't know what it was called. So my first real formal introduction to creativity was a very dark one. I was caught graffitiing walls. And that put me in a pretty bad place. Long story short, I was forgiven for it, but I was also encouraged to take that craft and do it in a legal way. That led me to designing t-shirts and whatnot. And out of pure commercial sort of minded I designed prom dresses. Because when I was designing t-shirts in school, selling t-shirts, it was like, $20 here, $20 there. Then prom came along. There were girls who were saying, hey, I want a prom dress. I'll pay $300 for it. I was like, oh, wow.
In those days,
I can do that. I just sketched stuff out and got to tailor, made it. And I started to go around doing this.
Wow.
So then I suddenly got into fashion design. Yeah. And I really enjoyed making, again, back to the whole thing of crafting. I like making stuff, like drawing it. I can create this. I started doing that as a very masculine, very athletic young man. But people around me started to go like, dude, are you, I'm like, what do you mean? I just like designing dresses. Oh yeah, do you I'm like, dude, and it was hard. And of course, your parents would think that you're not going to make it.
Yeah.
You're not going to make any money.
Very different times.
So you were immediately ostracized and there was something wrong with you or you couldn't do well in your studies. That's why you're doing this. All that stuff came. It was huge baggage. And having gone through all that, I almost gave up because of that. I want to just be normal. I just want to be accepted.
I think it's also in those days, at least for Singaporeans here, like arts is like the space you go in if you can't get into science
Absolutely.
and the other parts of it, right?
And
So it's like this fallback that you...
Exactly. So you feel like something wrong with you. And at that time, at that age, you had no one to turn to. It wasn't like you can go to your counselor, your teacher. Your teacher would be like, yes, you should get up that.
Yeah.
And
Science.
you're completely lost and you don't know what that future holds.
Would fashion have been an option?
It would have been. It would have been. But again, it's hindsight 20, who knows?
Yeah, exactly.
Right? But it was also fashion that led me to what I'm doing today. It was weirdly enough, I was lucky to find a teacher in junior college who was, she was so gung-ho, like no one accepted me. I wanted to do fashion design as my A-levels. No one allowed me to do it except her. She went to the Ministry of Education and petitioned for it and I got me doing it. And bless her, my life changed because of her. And I did a fashion project, and I won the Young Designers Award for it. And that opened so many doors for me, scholarships and everything. And because of an unfortunate event, I lost a scholarship. And by the fact that I lost a scholarship to go to London, a friend of mine actually got me going to California. That's where I fell in love with film and advertising, and that's how it happened. But the point here, back to your question, is the educational process where I felt like I don't want any other kid to feel that way.
Yeah.
If you have talent and you're passionate about art, don't let somebody extinguish it.
Yep.
Don't be like, what I was going through. So by creating Creatopia was to not only tell the kids who have this desire to go, look, there are many avenues for you to be incredibly successful. Let me bring Joseph Kahn, great music video director, to talk to 100 kids and tell them, I make music videos for a living and I'm damn good at it. And you can too. Making them excited about possibilities. We had all sorts of stuff with voiceover classes, letting them just know what it's like, be a photographer, etc. Let them know that it's possible, right? And give them the impetus and the inspiration to continue doing this whole thing. So that's why, to me, that is a very, very important part of this because it's not like, I'm giving back and all that. No, I just want you to be like what I was going through. And it's amazing. Even till today, we've evolved it along differently. Education has taken on a different thing. I think schools are tough. To your earlier point, creativity is not binary. There's no, is this answer or that answer? You didn't get it right, that's trouble. I struggle with Singapore because, I have an 11-year-old daughter. Along the way, we've gone to schools and had parent-teacher sessions before. I had one unfortunate situation where a teacher told me, I have a creative writing class. And I was excited. And in the same moment she said that, she's like, but you cannot write about anything that's too out of this world. I go, excuse me? You just say creative writing, didn't you? And you're telling me you can't do that. Oh yeah, the syllabus doesn't allow us to accept anything that is too out of this world. I'm like, that defeats the whole purpose of creative writing. And the immediate answer is, that is just the rules. The whole notion of this is SOP irritates me because number one, it's not an answer. Number two, you're not allowing kids to flex, right? And I think part of the education process of creativity is allowing them to explore. Part of exploration is to quote unquote make mistakes, to fail. If I had one silver bullet right now for an educational change, is I will create classes to teach kids to fail beautifully.
Yeah.
Try and go and fail. And fail beautifully. Right? Fail forward, whatever you want to call it. Just try.
Upwards.
And have that ability and that encourage to do that. Because that's our process, right? And when I was in art school, one of our crazy teachers, one of the first exercises we ever did was go and do something so embarrassing, film it and bring it to class. So the next day, everybody brought in some weird thing. Mine was, I put a bag of just some yellow liquid in my pocket. I went to someone in the mall to ask where the bathroom was, and right there and then I crushed this thing. It just looked like I peed my pants. Filmed that. I brought it to class, didn't understand why we were doing it. And then eventually the teacher said, you've done one of the most embarrassing things that you've ever done in your life. Anything from this point forth, creative related things you're going to do is not going to be as embarrassing. There's so nothing to fear. The moral of that lesson was learn not to fear embarrassment, right? So you've gone through the worst thing you've ever experienced already. Go be embarrassed. Have a whole room of people laughing and tell you how stupid your idea is. That's cool. Because out of the 10 times that someone's going to laugh at it, there's one time it's going to be like, wait, that's great. That's when you're going to change the world.
Yeah.
Right. I think if you're talking about education in Singapore, I don't think children are given enough, not just children, but kids who are learning, are not given enough room to do that, to fail, to be embarrassed, to, you know.
You have a, 14-year-old?
15 years.
How's that working out?
I was going to say, to me, it's finding that balance between giving them sufficient resources to discover and do their thing and explore, but also listening to the story, especially the Scotch tape example. How do you leave enough room for serendipity, for boredom, and also overcoming hardship by themselves? To me, that's the balance I want to strike to allow him to be creative in his own. Yes, our systems were very limiting, and I grew up in Malaysia. There was no system.
Anything was okay.
But it did create who we are in that sense, right? So I think there is a balance of, I think even in Singapore, you look at, yes, there's a school system, but there's also all the extracurricular system and all the classes that they go to as well. I think there's also a balance between giving them the right kind of resources, but sufficient room to also discover and play and like you say, right, fail and pick themselves up and all that. And I think that's where I try and balance it out. Because I find when he's bored, and he's a 15-year-old, it's hard to get bored these days with 4 years.
It's impossible.
It's a big problem,
But that's where I find him playing his bass, creating music, for example. That's when I find, wow, those are moments that surprise me the most. I was going to ask if your kids are the same.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because like I have an 11-year-old and a 6-year-old. The 6-year-old, for the last 2 days over the weekend, just keeps coming into my room going, I'm bored. What can I do now? And he wants to turn on the TV, basically. And I'm like, just go do stuff, like whatever your heart kind of like, go into your room, try to create something, draw. I think the problem with kids these days is that there's no chance of being bored. They have no chance of like, they refuse to go outside. And I think that to me is also a problem because that's where you kind of discover serendipitous things and all that. It's also kind of where you see, you know, a better part of the world, right? Because we had this conversation before. There's this quote, like, if you want to know what's wrong in the world, go online. If you want to know what's right in the world, go outside, right? Because you want to be able to sort of see the world and kind of get opportunities to have interesting things happen. But no, there's just no chance of being bored.
I think that's a huge problem right now. I think the amount of stimulation they're constantly getting, it's like as soon as you stop that stimulation, they go into this withdrawal. And Steven Spielberg said it best. He's like, you know, children today don't have the opportunity to daydream. And I think when you daydream, 100%. It's where things come out, right?
100%.
And you're looking at things differently. And suddenly, you know, I'm looking at a cloud. I'm not seeing a cloud. I'm seeing a rabbit.
Ideas collide better when you're like,
exactly
just thinking.
And I think that's one of the biggest problems that we're faced with right now with kids and all.
Problem is one, but I think we also talked a little bit. I mean, Gerald talked a bit about like, I think the other thing about teaching kids is not to really give a crap about what other people think. It's probably the other important.
Absolutely,
The more you fail, the more you just be yourself.
I don't care about what people think.
Just do your thing.
When you become old, you actually realize nobody's thinking about you to begin with.
No one actually really thinks
No one
about
cares.
at all. No one cares. I'm just very curious about your conversations with parents actually. Because you're like on like the space of, you know, let's fail and all that. And then you have, I mean, parents are, I mean, all sorts of different ones, right? Were there any interesting conversations that you had with parents?
Loads. Loads. Honestly, a lot, when we were running Creatopia, a lot of parents would send their kids here. First question they ask is, does this help our DSA? Do I get a certificate at the end of it?
Yes.
You know, do I get like very practical, very pragmatic point of view? I'm like, no, we're just having here make funny voices, trying to be a voiceover artist. That's what we're doing. We're spending 2 hours doing that? I'm like, yes. Letting them imagine, letting them speak, letting them find that confidence to be standing in front of a microphone. It feels different when you're standing here and a microphone in front of you. You know, how does that feel to get that? That's what we're teaching. And it's a I don't know, visceral thing. It's a hard thing to explain, but they can't understand that. You know, a lot of parents don't, with a few exceptions. And when they do, they see, we get these messages of like, you know, my daughter came back home and she's so excited, you know, she wants to go back again. And it's like, I didn't realize that could have that kind of impact.
Love it.
To me, that's where it becomes real. That becomes sort of a very positive thing. And when I was talking about failures earlier, it's exactly that. It's allowing them to try goofy stuff, embarrassing stuff, right? And weird stuff. And that's kind of how you discover yourself, right? And there's no real formula to that. And I think today's world, there's very little opportunity for parents or kids or anybody to really try that.
Sometimes it's the opposite, right? I need to remind myself sometimes to just let go and let it be. I mean, growing up without phones, I went out, played, and went missing for hours without my parents knowing where I was. And then get home by 7 p.m. get yelled at. You know? And there was no safety net, right? I could do whatever when I was falling and all around. I think the challenge now is how do you allow some of that to happen, you know? And that's why I remind myself, like, okay, let's not hover, let's not check where he is on the phone and track him. He recently went overseas for the first time with his friends, and I'm panic as hell, right? He was going overseas, and you know, where are you going? What if something happens? Should I go with you? I'm like, I think sometimes just as parents, we have that responsibility to go, just let go and allow that space of exploration and learning
Because it looks like grass, don't eat it.
and then learn by yourself, right? Or the other way, completely.
It's funny because the last time I was talking to Joseph Kahn, he was, you know, the kids come up to him and says, can I really become a music video director and make money doing that and earn a living? He's like, yeah, you can. You know, that kid went back home and got yelled at by him, right? And came back again and was texting Joseph about it. It's just, you know, but I think that the problem right now is parents are like so hung up on like, oh, they need academic success and all that stuff, which again, all justifiable and it's all right, but it doesn't mean that every moment of their lives need to be towards that objective, if you will, right?
Yeah.
There needs to be freedom to discover other things and be given the right to do that.
Yeah, my kid's into breaking, and when he first started, I was going, what are you going to get out of this, right? But sometimes we forget that growing up is a process.
Yep.
He might love this thing, get some things out of it, and move on to something else, but that's going to allow him to do other things and learn stuff. I'm glad. I mean, he's having friends, he's building a community, he's exercising and out there. And that's all you need. Sometimes.
Well, exactly. Sometimes that's all you know, it's not always the end game is some kind of academic sort of benefit.
I was listening to this podcast this morning on the Kevin O'Leary one, and he was saying he will hire the people who are eclectic, people who just do not have one tail. They have multiple dimensions in what they do.
Multi-hyphenates,
super curious. He'd be like, boss, I need 3 days off to ride a bicycle across the country, for example. All right, go do it. It kind of drew like the links to what you were saying, just giving us the space for creativity and exploration. Perhaps in adulthood, that could come through also. You know, it's just like, it's fun for me.
There doesn't need to be always a fixed outcome of why are you doing this. Right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So having a different tail, a different dimension does add a lot of value in the way you creatively think.
Yeah, absolutely. Recently moving to Bangkok, my daughter has gone to an international school, and I can see a stark difference in her persona. Right. And one of those weird things is we used to pick up my daughter from school, and as we walk back home, we'll ask her, how was the day? How was your day? One word. Good. Nah, same.
Yeah.
That was as far as it goes.
That's what I'm getting now.
Right now, 6 months after, she cannot stop talking
Amazing.
about what's going on. So when I was talking to my wife about this, I was like, what is this? Right. And if my wife is a lot more analytical than me. She's like, look, think about it. When you're in Singapore, the only time you get to interact with friends is recess. Right. The rest of the time, you're not allowed to talk in class. You're not allowed to do this. You're not allowed to do that. So recess comes around. You spend 10 minutes standing in line waiting for food, get the thing, sit down, and you do whatever you gotta eat your food. And next thing you know, you have like 10 minutes to hang out with your friends. That's it. So your entire day is incredibly colorless. Right? That's why they have nothing to say. Whereas here in the international school, they have an 1 hour lunch break and they let you do what you do. They have classes set aside that just allows you to play. And the only exception is that you're not allowed to take any of your devices. You just play. I think that giving permission for them to play allows them to learn more. Right? To foster things that really matter. Like, I don't remember much about my class. I do remember my ECAs and anybody does, right? Now time. And that's what you want them to have, those memories, those experiences, you know, good, bad, ugly. But that's what it is. Let them have that. Give them the permission to do that. I feel like now it's like no kid in this part of the world is allowed to play, right?
It's creativity and play in a framework. in the box. It's the Singapore kind of education system right now. But on the flip side to that, like, how has raising an 11-year-old shaped your perception on creativity?
I think the bravery, the innocence that comes out of 11-year-old's head is what reminds me of what I need to be half the time. And sometimes you try to solve a problem, a brief comes along, you're trying to do it this way. But what you need to do is actually not trying to put your head into it, but take a step back. Like, I forget that sometimes when I look at how she solves problems, there's a certain ease about it and a certain no holds barred, no rules. Just, why don't you pretend to just do this? Sometimes it's like, that's Captain Obvious, but actually that's true. I think that's the one thing that has helped me as a creative director, but her bravery as well helped me a lot. I see the way she goes into something. I don't know, maybe it's over the years as you've seen a lot of ideas come along, some work and some don't. You've subconsciously built a whole archive of do's and don'ts, right? And you shouldn't have that in a way, and I think those do's and don'ts sometimes become a baggage for me. Whereas when I'm looking at a 10, 11-year-old kid, there's none of that, right? They just go at it differently. One of her projects in school recently was, how do you solve the flooding problem in Bangkok? It's an interesting thing. The world's the oyster. They could come up with anything. And some of the kids come back with like, we turn every car into a boat. Yeah, hit a button, it becomes a boat. Why stop the flooding? Go roll with it. And I'm like, that sounds interesting. Like, I think that's the kind of solution that we stop having.
Yep.
We go into this serious, or it's got to be like can work. It's got to be this, like, no, what is the most, interesting, the most original idea? Maybe that's where we should start. So sometimes when I see her, I'm always reminded of that.
And I think that's probably the goal of what we should look at in terms of teaching our kids, which is try to preserve that curiosity and wonder and bravery. Because sometimes I feel like the school kind of beats it out of them.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And if that continues to happen, you're going to have a whole generation of kids that are fearful or don't have the capacity to think beyond that. As a consequence of that, a lot of what's deemed as creative now are derivative of things that have been done elsewhere. Where's that new bold step that you take? The one that will make you shudder at night going, oh my God, is that going to fail? And that's my personal mantra. And for the longest time, Lee Clow once said, and maybe I'm butchering it a little bit, he always said, if an idea doesn't scare you, it's not a good one to begin with. And I always told myself, like, when I review work, does it scare me? Or is it just like, most of the time, and Vincent's heard this a million times before, it's like, it's so right, it's wrong. I think that's what's happening now. A lot of solutions feel right. And everything that we're presenting to clients as well sometimes is, what's the return on investment? Is it proven to be right? Have you run that whole piece of data in the back end to prove that it's right?
You have done this before.
Exactly.
Like 5 people have done it before. Okay, then we'll do it.
Yeah, exactly, right?
They want certainty, that's the thing.
Yeah.
They want some sense of certainty and guarantee that this will work. Whereas the whole point of creativity and actually strategy at any point is really, what's the best decision I can make at this point of time? What's the best thing I can do based on certain parameters that we assume, or not we assume, but we dictate will probably work. But there's no guarantee to it, right? But everybody wants certainty.
Yeah. And people look for insights. And I don't disagree that insights are very important. But the famous quote from Henry Ford, right? If you ask people what they want, they want faster horses. It's having foresight.
Yeah.
Instead of just insight, right? What's over there?
Yeah.
You read the tea leaves and go, okay, it's probably that direction. And I'm dealing with a client right now that I'm actually writing a white paper. As we talked about earlier, I'm an athlete and I'm seeing how sports is shifting, right? Into a much more communal space. There are more people trying to, watch concerts now in a sporting event than they do in a music festival. That hints something is changing.
Yep.
The world is shifting. You don't look at inside and go, this is what's happening, but it's like, okay, what's happening over here? And how am I going to engineer this process with my clients to go, your sports sponsorship is archaic. You need to go with the flow, right? The clients are going to ask me like, well, but we've been doing this for 10 years. It's looking data showing this. I get it, but this shift is going to happen fast. It's going to be seismic. Unless you're ahead of it, you're going to be falling behind. Your $150 million investment in something is not going to reap the returns, right? So it's funny that as a creative person, I'm having this conversation because I sound like I should be a strategist or something. But that's the kind of partnership that creativity is supposed to bring, right? To show you where it's going and then show you a big, bold move as to how you should go there.
There was a conversation I was telling my son that day, and I don't even know whether this is right or not, but it sounded right at least. I said, the greatest ambitions is 50% bullshit. And it kind of has to be. Otherwise, it's not ambitious enough. I was using an example of Elon Musk going, we'll get to Mars by 2030 years.
Past, yeah.
No, there's no certainty whether he'll get there.
Absolutely, yeah.
But he's going to work towards it. And in the process of working towards it, he's going to get some gains.
Yeah.
He might get in 2035 or whatever not, but you almost have to be 50% bullshit in that sense. Otherwise, you're not brave enough.
Absolutely.
This is better than Singapore's World Cup thing.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, earlier when I was telling that story about that webisode thing, and when I presented to my client, first question he asked me is, do people actually watch films, online to be able to appreciate this? And this sounds funny because this is what we do now, and that wasn't that long ago, right? But a lot of times you just got to, of course, my answer at the time was, hell yeah. Right?
Yeah.
But I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Right? Half the time, I don't know whether it's going to be successful or not. I spoke to Bruce Lee's family trying to bring Bruce Lee back to life. And of course, they're asking me, how is this going to influence people? It's going to change people's lives and all the rest of it. I know it's going to impact people to some extent. I don't know definitively what it's going to be, but sometimes it's a bit of a leap.
Yeah.
It's always a creative punt the best ideas are always.
Exactly. Like you're in the music industry and you create music. Do you know it's going to be a hit? No one really knows.
Yeah.
I don't think Led Zeppelin wrote their songs and know it was going to be classics. It's just what it is.
It's usually the same clients that say, this is crazy, I'm never going to do this. They will come to you and go, when the competitor does it, why didn't we think of it?
Yeah.
Precisely. And that's like, again, rearview mirror is
hindsight.
Yeah.
It's 2020. Just looking at the time now, just wanted to also talk a little bit about what you're doing currently. You shifted to Bangkok with your family. Just recently done High Rocks with your wife and your daughters now getting into that. Like, what's up with you and with the shift?
What's up with
Yeah. I think maybe just to set the stage what made you decide to move to Bangkok? And when you said yes to moving to it, what other things you had to say no to?
I mean, okay, first of all, I think I'm following a pattern that I've been doing all my life, my career. I do have a little bit of, I don't want to say an expiration date per se, but when I feel like I'm getting a bit too comfortable in a place, I want to go somewhere I'm uncomfortable. Because I feel like the learning process is highly accelerated when you are in a learning mode. It humbles you, turns on all your facets to absorb new things, and it forces you in some ways to be a lot more creative that way. So, I've moved from Singapore to US to China to Australia and all that. Part of it is that I just want to be in a place that I'm constantly put in this uncomfortable situation to learn. So this is another step of that. Earlier we were talking about also, being able to explore some of these ideas that my wife and myself always had. But in Singapore, it's a bit tough to pull off some of these things, whereas I think a place like Bangkok, culturally and financially as well, allows you a little bit more latitude to try. So that's kind of sort of why we decided to take that step. But there's a big part of me that, it's weird, but I feel like as you advance in your career, you get to a point where you have more control over the decision that you want to make for yourself. Meaning, I want more things that are a lot more aligned with my values and my wife's values. In other words, I feel like I've earned a right to work with people I love and respect. Less the assholes, if you will, and also less the things that I feel like, unfortunately, have spent a lot more of my time doing that's further away from the core of what I love. It's great to have a title that's a paragraph long, but the downside of that, you spend 80% of your time in boardrooms talking about stuff that's far away from creativity. And I've come to that understanding and realization of not liking that. I want more of this. So choosing to go to Bangkok, limiting my scope, focusing on stuff, I'm a lot happier just doing that. Launched a campaign recently for a client in China. I wrote a lot of the stuff. I shot a lot of the stuff, and I enjoyed that. The downside is I don't have the army of people that I can activate, but it's great because I'm getting back to something that really excites me. Did that win a Cannes Lion? No. But was that groundbreaking for the business? Did that move that business line? It absolutely did. Again, that affirmed like having more focus brings success in the work that I make, but also just makes me a lot happier.
So what's next for you in the next year?
Continue to High Rocks. No, I'm actually, Funnily, the world works in a way when you kickstart something, when there's momentum, it begets more momentum. So wanting to limit myself a little bit on this side of it, I'm opening myself to a new business venture that I'm creating. I'm moving from a creator to an educator a little bit more. Over the last 25 years, I've realized that in our business or otherwise, communication skills are very, very lacking. I've seen great creatives being unable to string two sentences together to sell their idea, and therefore the idea dies. I've seen clients who stutter in front of global clients and whatnot, and I'm like, you're incredibly smart, but in front of your bosses right now, you just look like an amateur. And I've seen this problem happen over and over again, and I'm want to plug that hole. So right now, I'm actually creating a coaching business to help people present their ideas. Writing a book about it. I'm creating a whole module around it. Helping some business leaders right now on a personal level, private level, to help them with their speeches, learning to teach them how to communicate with people. So that's one big side of my new adventure that I'm double clicking on. Working with my wife to create a couple of businesses as well, consulting on a fitness race that hopefully will be as big as High Rocks. So yeah, just really trying new things. And I think come next year, I'm going to go to culinary school.
Nice. In Thailand?
Yes, that's the next thing.
Well, Johnny's a great cook. At this point already, testify to that.
Again, it's just, trying things, learning. And there's a very humbling feeling that you get, because years ago, I went to a doctor who recommended that I need to go and spend more time doing stuff that's very tactile that I can learn from the ground that I will struggle with. So he recommended me a couple of solutions, which was one, go learn a musical instrument. Because no matter how fast you want to learn it, ain't gonna happen, dude. You just have to go and grind through it to learn it, right? I didn't want to do that for some reason. I picked up knitting. For some weird reason, I thought knitting would really torture me. That would really teach me this lesson. So I went and hung out with a group of Shanghainese ladies who are like 30 years older than me, learn how to knit. The scarf that I made looked terrible, but it was a scarf. That process was really interesting to me.
Very cool.
Learning something that I was embarrassed, awkward, blah, 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 but put my head to it and I learned. I had conversations with Shanghainese women and learned a lot about their lives. That humbling feeling was something I really enjoyed. It gave me a bit of peace. Reading books that I don't normally read just to see a whole different perspective of the world, that felt good.
Yeah.
So I'm now moving into a world where I want to do a lot more of that, to just learn things and hope. So on one hand, I'm absorbing, learning a lot of new things and a lot of new experiences. And on the other hand, I'm giving through coaching that I can help somebody elevate. Recently, I've helped one of my clients present in New York. She went from using the word basically 47 times in 3 minutes to confidently presenting, differently. I felt like a proud father, going, okay, I had something to do with that. And if I keep doing that kind of stuff, I absorb and I give, feel life's good that way.
Has your definition of success shifted with this new chapter that you're going into?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Sometimes it's very hard to really figure out what success really means because it's constantly evolving. One of the things that I found quite interesting 6 months ago when I was packing out my boxes and shipping it, I found a lot of metal trophies that look like animals that once was everything. When I started my career in New York, I would do anything to win an award. In fact, that was one thing I said to my creative director when I first started working was that, in 2 years' time, I'm going to have more trophies than you, blah, blah, blah. And he told me to go to strip joint. But it was so important. And winning those trophies back then, I was crying. I was like proud. I made it, I'm a Singaporean kid, made it in Madison Avenue. It was everything. 6 months ago, I was trying to figure out how to throw them away. And this is not me being arrogant or anything like that, but it was a realization at this age of my life, I'm going, that really didn't matter anymore.
Yeah.
Right? And you go, can we get this to some metal places? Can you smell it down? Can you make something out of it? I don't just want to throw it away. It was a weird conversation, but to me it was, in the middle of the night, just thinking about it, going like, okay, I've arrived. I don't need those things to validate how badass a creative I am. Yeah. And it's not about that anymore. Right? Yeah. So that has sort of evolved. Don't know what it's going to be, 5 years from now. Who knows?
But I'm sure that grind and learning how to do hard work got you to where you are today. I'm just curious, what's your advice to people who just joined the industry, brand new creative or art director?
Be a student to the craft. That hasn't changed for me. I think what has changed in the last 25 years of my career, I used to be, I mean, Vincent probably knows this about me. I've got a laser sharp focus. I work hard. You know, I would bust my ass. I'll do everything. I would hands on everything. I don't think that's necessarily a way of success. I do think be a student to the craft, and that makes you humble. That makes you learn, ask questions, be extremely curious. And those moments when everyone tells you to, you know, this is the way to go, or else resist the temptation to do that. You know, I think you need to find that voice that you have. I think for a young creative to find what that voice is, and your voice is not defined by what the Ken jury's voice is. Don't do that kind of work because you're pleasing them. What is the kind of voice that you have? I think a lot of times now, because of the exposure to a lot of information and channels, I don't think a lot of creative people really know what their voice is. It's like, oh, I'm a little bit of this, I'm a little of that. It's like find your voice, be comfortable with that. But there's a lot in craftsmanship I cannot stress enough that young creatives need to respect and adopt and learn. Because this is what we do. Whether it's writing a piece of music or as John Haggerty used to say, not a lot of people on this planet can take a white piece of paper, write something on it and make you cry or laugh or feel something. That's not an easy thing to do, right? And you need to learn how to do that. So that's what I would tell a young creative right now. Don't look at the glitzy things. That's just like, be humble, learn the craft.
Is this the dark side?
Be a great storyteller, you know, move someone and have some value in what you would do.
What about travel? I'm, at this point, at least, I'm of 80% of the mind that my son would need to get out of Singapore at least and explore
100%.
and get exposed. How much of that would you go?
I'm glad you brought that up. I feel like I've worked in different continents and different cities and things like that. I cannot stress that enough. In fact, I was just telling my hairdressers about having her daughter go spend some time in China. You know, it's hard to explain what it's like working in a different environment. And I would encourage people to work in environments that are quite competitive. China is an example. Sometimes you hear people in coffee shops saying, oh, you know, Chinese people, you know, or Singaporeans are not competitive enough and things like that. I'm like, but you don't know what that really means. You need to go work in an environment where you look at the fire in people's eyes. You know, the young generation, the guys who are super resourceful, who are just not afraid, as they say, you know, have thick skin to learn, right? Those guys are so driven. So I would encourage any young creative or any young person to go work in these environments and learn from them, you know, and absorb, because it's a sight to see,
100%.
right? They're not afraid of trying. And I think, again, there's a certain theme to what we've been discussing today. If you go back to the very source of education, if across the years, if you're told it's either a binary yes or no, right or wrong, need to stay this course, by the time you get to that age, in your mind is this. Whereas when you look at some countries, their mind is so wide open about trying anything. You need to train this muscle to expand this, to go this way. The best way of doing that is going to these markets, spending some time that it will force your mind to go like that. You know, because if you keep staying this way, that's...
Yeah, I mean, there is a lot of value in staying uncomfortable, right? And forcing you to continue to be a student, continue to learn, for example. And I think that's a big, big part of being creative.
Yeah, sometimes it's a very minor thing. When I went to China, my Mandarin was so horrible. You know, they will make fun of me. I hear sniggers down the hallway because they would just be like, that guy's so terrible. You know, it looks Asian, can't speak at all, can only order wonton noodles. I told my guys, I said, okay, give me I don't know why I said 9 months, but in 9 months' time, I will be doing presentations to Chinese clients without using a single word of English. Yeah. It was painful, dude. And I did that, right? And it's like forcing myself to be able to do that. At the end of that presentation, I remember vividly, it was for Xingtao Beer, and Chinese clients presented the whole thing. My team stood up and clapped for me. The clients were like, dude, I didn't award you this business. What's going on? My guys were proud of me, you know. But I was like, look, I earned my stripes. And that's the kind of thing I think kids need to do. Just get in there and learn that, you know, whatever it could be, right? And enjoy that grind, right? Enjoy that discomfort of not knowing. Don't go in there and be like, hey, man, I'm from Singapore, dude. What's up?
Great Thanks, Johnny, thanks for coming by. Appreciate this. One of the things that to me was really interesting about you and why we wanted you on this podcast was, other than just, thinking about creativity and what that means in the work that we do, is also this sort of multi-hyphenate, sort of wearing many hats, looking at different things, and ultimately the adjacent part of what you do around your work that actually complements the work that you do as well. That to me has been really, really interesting. I think from an education standpoint as well, those conversations that we had about, kids, and obviously you have 2 kids, how do we get them to think about things more creatively, and how do we not let the education system stifle them in that way? Because I find most of my adult life have been trying to unlearn what I've learned in school. Trying to move out of that box and think about it creatively. I guess from your standpoint, because the topic of this podcast is around reinvention, and you've talked a lot about staying uncomfortable. What does reinvention kind of mean to you as a person, and how have you lived a life of constant reinvention?
It's a weird thing, and I genuinely believe that quote, change before you have to. It's real. I feel like it's so easy, and people have said this in so many different ways. And Jeff Goodby used to say, once you start putting a plant in your office, you need to go find another job. I think it's one of those constant reminders that I have myself. It's just, how do you constantly seek to evolve, right? Not change for change's sake, but just evolve and just be better because of that. I think that's the idea of reinvention, because it's also creating new adventures, right? Because when I was in China, one of the things that always bothered me a little bit, when you go into a meeting room, people will stand up because of the title. They will call me Chen Zong, and as a respectful term. I always believe when you're called Chen Zong, you're at a point where you start believing your own hype. It's very easy to do that.
Drink your own Kool-Aid.
Yeah, it's very easy to do that. And it doesn't end well, right? And in the early part of my career, I had the good fortune of working on Star Wars Episode 1 for George Lucas. And so I spent a significant amount of time, my partner and myself, at Lucas Ranch. And it was great to be there. I'm a Star Wars fan. I would tear up the first day I walked in there. And over the last few months where we worked there, I was in the cafeteria or in the room where we were reviewing, storyboards and everything. George Lucas was worshipped like a god, right? Everything he said was like, George said, that has to be. And then Episode 1 came out. Then I go, Episode 1 wasn't great, unfortunately. And it's also because, again, all due respect, I still think George Lucas is a genius, but when you're surrounded with this notion that I know it all, it stops, right? The reinvention or the breakthrough that A New Hope first did was not there. You know what I mean? So you've lost some of that magic. That's the danger. I think we get into whether I believe I'm deserving of being called a Chen Zong, you end up regurgitating things. And there's also a danger of people coming to you because of the success you had. So if I had that Johnny Walker success, I must have had like 6 other alcohol brands coming to me saying, I want to do the same thing. And it would be convenient for me to just keep doing that, right? But it is much better and much more enriching to say, you know what, I've done that. I'm going to step on that and do better. Just trying to do better. That's really what I keep reminding myself. So in the spirit of reinvention, that's what it takes. Selfishly speaking, the fun comes when you reinvent, right? So new stuff starts happening. Then you go, "Ooh, I didn't know that." Then you would never get to that unless you're putting yourself out there.
Life needs a bit of excitement.
I mean, your story of constant change is inspiring. I mean, when we talk about reinvention, obviously within that, there's also fears and insecurities and concerns as well. I mean, maybe the last question for me is what are some of those for you and how you overcome that? Because a lot of people want to change. Yeah, and like you say, you want to change before you have to. But obviously with a lot of that comes some concern and fears. And can I do it? And is this the right time? Am I too late? It's a big question for many
Maybe
people.
I'm already at the top of the summit. Will I have to give all this up for something else?
I'll be bullshitting if I said I knew the answer to all of that.
Yeah.
And even till this day, I still have those concerns. Some of them are very immediate, right? Moving to a new country, taking on a whole thing. I mean, there's some bills to pay, right? There are some things that you can control. You work out a financial advisor and figure out whether that's irresponsible or not. You do have a little bit of sense check that you can do. Other things, it's just, sometimes you just got to have that confidence, right? I like to believe that over the years, I've learned enough to be able to have the right kind of credentials. If things don't work out, I have a backup plan. It sounds terrible to say that. It's not really a backup plan, but I know I'm confident if I work my way around it. You know what I mean? And that's all I got, and I don't believe in backup plans really, because if I left my job and I have bosses in the past and says, hey, you always come back to this office. I'm like, nah.
This is the Viking burning ship moment.
Yeah, you burn your ship. Yeah, you burn your ship, you move forward. And I think by virtue of doing that, doors open. If you don't do that, you're constantly going to be fearful. Right. And so I'm not asking anybody to be irresponsible in terms of making changes, but have confidence and have that belief that things can happen for you. But I don't think those things will happen unless you take that step and create that kinetic energy. Right. So
we actually talked about this when we were discussing about your move, right? I think this is more of a strategist way of looking at it, but there's a concept called fear setting, right? Which is if you think about a move that you need to make that's uncomfortable, you think about, okay, if something bad happens, right, what can I do to sort of mitigate the loss, right? And then from there, what do I need to do to get within 6 months, get back to where I am now? And once you actually do the exercise, you realize actually a lot of the fears are unfounded. And you can actually, a lot of things are easily reversible, unless you die, of course. Yeah. So I think there is that way of just looking at things and understanding that actually a lot of these fears are just maybe voices in your head. Because I think most of the time we are our worst critic, right? We're like, okay, don't do this. Yeah. We'll be, you're going to mess up your life. You've got such a good thing going on right now. So this is more like trying to alleviate those thoughts in your head. Yeah.
But I mean, as much as I believe ambition is 50% bullshit, but I believe there's also 50% being prepared for this as well, right? Having done the hard work, having built some of those skill sets, having retrained yourself in some stuff. I think that's also part of it, right? Rather than jumping into the blind.
Of course, you can't just again, that's irresponsible or responsible change, right? So you can't just dive into it blindly. You need to prep for it. You need to be ready. You need to understand, the consequences of this happens and that happens. But the trick is to find the ability to strike that balance of being able to consider those things, but not let those things just stop you from moving, right?
Like fear paralysis, basically.
Yeah, fear paralysis is a dangerous thing. You need to be able to okay, I need to do this diligently, but keep going, right? And to your point, sometimes when you keep moving, then you realize, actually, okay, I can clear that hurdle. I can clear this hurdle. Next thing it becomes easier.
I mean, there's also a definition of courage. It's not the absence of fear. It's like fear is there, but I just do it anyway.
Yeah. And hopefully you also have people around you who are supportive enough to hold your hand when you need to go through it. So again, I don't know half of what's going to happen next, but I do know that a simple question you ask yourself, and this is a tough question to answer, and Vincent and I talked about this before, is like when you wake up in the morning and ask yourself, what makes you happy? Like what makes you happy?
Helping clients unlock value.
And it's a hard question to answer, really. And if you find the one thing that instinctively comes out, then do more of it.
Cool. That's a great way to end. Thanks very much for having us.
Thank you.
I look forward to seeing what's next from you.
Hey, but honestly, I think what you guys are doing amazing. To have this and take your time and create this. I know it's not easy. And also, you don't understand, the world needs a lot more of this, right? Just so there's more inspiration, there's more positivity out there. I think really, I tip my hat to you guys for doing this. So when I heard from Andre that you were working on this, I was like, that's amazing. When I saw the Paul version, I saw, was it Toby? Yeah. And I was like, this is great. You guys are doing a great thing, honestly.
Thank you.
And thank you for having me.
Thanks for being on, man.
This is great. I appreciate it.